features two very fine writers / podcasters, and Kevin Brockway will join us in just a second around the corner. Also, we'll have a sound bite. Hopefully, you can hear it from Billy Napier yesterday in Gainesville. Show you what the body of Tyreek Sapp looks like. Oh my gosh, this guy's a freak. A picture there, I'll show you. And then Allie will be on. Peek Wilbur will join us for the second half of the show, and we'll get Kevin to tell us what he's writing tomorrow. He's got something going on in the Gators. So stand by. Coming your way next right here on the Buddy Martin Show.
Yes, it's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking. But be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye.
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Good evening and welcome to the program. It feels like Monday, but it's not. It's Wednesday night. And we have our usual lineup tonight. Kevin Brockway is just back from the campus. Well, actually getting on the campus, but he's back working on his story. Well, he'll tell you what he's got. Does a fine job in the Gainesville Sun and on his podcasts and stuff. And then Peek Wilbur will be joining you. But I'm going to put this picture up here because I was there at practice. I was at a press conference yesterday, and there's no news today, but there is a photo here that I must put up because we're going to talk about this guy a lot this year. He is a freak, I'm telling you. He is 275 pounds of blue steel playing on the outside. And I'll tell you what, this would make me afraid to be running out there. This is him, I guess, in practice today as they loaded up and got ready to go out and do some workouts. There he is. Look at that guy. He is the edge rusher. I'm telling you, he is a physical freak. That's all I can say about that. And he is going to be there. And by the way, it's not all gloom and doom up there. I know what you've all been talking about and thinking about. Allie has a podcast up, Peek Inside the Gators on this. And of course, there's concern. But as I said to Billy yesterday, he's got ball players. He knows that. I don't need to tell him that. He knows that. And they've got, if you're thinking that's all they got, well, let me just say, you better got another thing coming because they got players. And this guy will bear me out, although we haven't got to see him on the hoof yet. He's been around the block a time or two. He knows ball. He knows players. And I just got a good feeling about this team, Kevin Brockway. We're going to hear from Billy about that in a minute. Good evening to you, Kevin.
Yeah, no question. And, for as impressive of a picture as that was of Sapp, who did Tyler Miles, the strength coach, say the strongest guy pound for pound for was on the team? Jaden Ball, freshman,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sophomore to be all SEC freshman last year, who's you can make the argument that 55-yard touchdown run against LSU really turned around Florida's season in terms of the 4-game winning streak to close it. He's a guy, and yet Billy Napier mentioned that he's still looking for him to be more consistent now and comports himself off the field. And you've got Jacoby Jackson behind him pushing him. So, yeah, there are weapons. I mean, last spring there was a 38-32 game in which DJ Lagway did not throw a pass, right? And Dallas Wilson caught 10 passes for 195 yards, mostly from Harrison Bailey. Mm-hmm. So I think there are plenty of other weapons on this team. If DJ Lagway is limited to start the season and this thing extends into the season. You'd feel a lot more better having him back there under center than not, I would think.
Well, I got the sense, I was trying to think how I felt about this. I'm going to write something about it tomorrow. There was a certain air of confidence about Billy. I wouldn't say he was cocky. even though the news was not great about Lagway, and we don't really know exactly what we've got here, except as we said on the program last night, anytime you talk about the health of Lagway, even if it's an ingrown toenail, it's important. And it will be that way this year. And everybody who starts out a comment about Florida, every podcaster or sports writer starts out, well, if DJ Lagway can stay healthy. And I get it, and I agree. But that can be said of a lot of teams. If your starting quarterback goes down, they got to stay healthy. The good thing about it is they've got an adequate quarterback. Obviously, nobody's going to fill in for him. And they've got depth everywhere. And I asked yesterday, I asked Billy about the possibility of this team not being able to, not having DJ, and the fact that he's got a ton of players, including the running back room, of which you just mentioned one. As you know, you're preaching to the choir on Jaden Ball. He's been my guy since before day one. And let's see if I can pull up what he said. Now, this may not be, real clear, and we'll see how it looks and whatever. And if not, we'll come back and talk about it. But the fact is that this guy is, let's see if we can play it first. And this is my question to him about what if it's not DJ Lagway. And here's what he said.
Some of those guys were, this is year 4.
You hearing that, Kevin?
Yeah.
Austin and Jake obviously were, they're 2 of the 6 or 7 that were here when we first got here. They've improved each cycle, and obviously their position had great senior campaigns. And then Najee and Davey both have played a lot of football. And here comes Bryce Lovett, who's part of that first recruit class that we had. And then the depth behind those is something that we haven't had. We've got some bridge there in year 2 and 3. We have 2 deep, but I think are in position to be a factor.
As much as this is DJ's team, so to speak, you have a ton of talent, especially at running back. And I'm just thinking that I know you have to think about what if you don't have him, you have a lot of talent to run offense, especially the running back room. Talk about the other people on the squad, especially the wide receivers, etc. You have a very balanced and deep and 2 football team that can cause problems for anybody.
Yeah, I think the big thing would be we're going to have to play complementary football regardless of who's quarterback. I mean, if you do your homework here, 85% of the teams in our league, 85% of the time, the team is going to play with the 2 quarterback. History is the best indicator of the future. And then we know that quality depth is critical. There's going to be weeks where we're missing 3 or 4. We're missing 6 or 7. And I think the depth is critical. It's a part of playing in this league, the physicality of the league, the level of depth within the league. And I think offensively, we certainly have a really good. When we talk about the front paired with the big, long, physical, tight end group, the brand of ball that we were able to play down the stretch, I think we're in a position to do that. So, look, quarterback play, and I've said this to you guys going all the way back to year 1. I think it's always indicative of how well people are playing around you. Right? So, I think we're always quick to give them the credit, quick to blame them at the same time. Right? So, I think we got a good surrounding cast on offense, and we got to go get them game ready. Hopefully that's the next month will present an opportunity.
All right, Kevin, your thoughts on that? I hope you can hear most out. It's about, and the fact is, when Lagway came in the game, they all played better. It's like the chicken and the egg. Were they better because he was in the game or what? Did they make him better? Yes, they did. So I didn't think there was too much telling in that, but you can tell he's thought about this.
I do think that, it was apparent last year they fed off DJ Lagway and they had a little more confidence in him, and maybe some players raised their level of play. But I do think too, and I pointed this out in my column tomorrow. I mean, you look at the lines of scrimmage. I mean, you go all the way back 2 years ago, and Jake Slaughter was a redshirt sophomore, filling in starting for Kingsley Agakin. Austin Barber was a redshirt sophomore starting at right and left tackle, but was banged up. But they weren't physically mature, and you saw it in the sack numbers, the number of sacks they allowed in 2023, the number of sacks they generated, which was, I believe, only 22. And then, you flip the script to 2024, and it really started to look like an SEC level line of scrimmage. And now that you're building more depth through recruiting classes behind it, as Billy alluded to, that's going to play well in the SEC. And that's what keeps your quarterback healthy, right? And that's why this league, Billy pointed out, playing one or more quarterbacks, this is such a brutal league in that regard, right? If you don't have the line of scrimmage play, your quarterback's going to get hurt. And, if you don't have the line of scrimmage play, you're not going to generate the run. You're not going to stop the run. It's going to be a long afternoon for you. So I think that, with that shored up, I think Billy has a little bit more confidence, even if he's going into a season with a quarterback that's less than 100%. And, my only concern about the DJ Lagway injury, even though it's minor, and I've pointed this out on another show, is you got to wonder if he's compensating at this point for other things too.
Which is what the other injury concerns you.
If this is just a reaction to something else. So, it's something that's going to be worth monitoring, and we will see on Saturday, our first open practice, if he throws or not. I would bet against it, but you never know. Maybe he'll be quick enough to heal by then, but if not, there'll be open practices the following week and the week after that, open periods that we'll be able to see, and we'll see if he progresses.
Just for a second, though, let's take him out of the equation, which is impossible to do. I said in my question, I hope you could hear it, tried to phrase this, as much as this is DJ's team, this is not necessarily all DJ. And I think he addressed that in his situation. Let's take the individual parts. First of all, the front seven on defense is spectacularly different. I mean, it is really going to be good. They're all excited about that. They don't talk about it too much, but I was around some people on Saturday night at the event with Tony Barnhart who kind of happen to know, and they're all excited about the fact they can put a real man's defense on the field. And my word, can they ever? And I put this guy's picture back up. 275 pounds of blue steel, who is just absolutely going to be amazing. That would be Tyreek Sapp. And he is a freak. He looks like a freak, and he is a freak. So let's see if we can get that off now. I haven't done that. Talk about Tyreek Sapp.
Tyreek Sapp is a guy that's grown over time, right? And he's gotten better each year, and really came on at the end of last year, 7 sacks, someone 275 pounds. Guy that practices with a lot of energy. What did Ron Roberts say? Tuesday through Saturday, he's on. His motor's running. I think he's a guy that other guys look up to, and I think he's a guy that can be, a decent edge rusher in this league. And let's not forget too, Caleb Banks, another guy up the gut who really came on last year, 4.5 sacks. George Gums, edge rusher.
Yeah, he's a guy I'm going to watch. George Gums is a guy there, and Billy made a point to mention him. And another guy is people who came in under the radar as no stars. And
and then speaking of stars too, I mean, the other side of that equation is LJ McCray. Is he going to come? Is he going to be a guy? He's made some gains in the weight room. Top 10 national recruit. Is he going to take a step forward and play to his potential too? On the flip side, and they've got Kofi Asari. Had a pretty good spring. The transfer from UMass. You've got the 2 freshmen, Jaden Woods and Jalen Wiggins, are guys that enrolled early. So I think there's a lot of options there. Everyone talked about losing Jack Pyburn, but I think that they've replenished that edge room pretty well. Cam James on the other side too with Tyreek Sapp. The other guy had a great summer in the weight room. So they've got a lot of guys that you can shuttle in and out, and you need that too because of the nature of the position. Up the gut still, I mean, Ron Roberts feels pretty good about what he has up the gut. I'm a little more skeptical, but I do know
that is gone, man. That master human being is gone for the middle.
If Jamari Lyons can come back from the foot, if Mekhi Barrow can take another step forward, he showed some promise as a freshman, and Brendan Bett, the transfer from Baylor, works out, then maybe you have enough guys there in terms of that. But I think the linebacking room obviously looks like Pup Howard's going to be a little limited to start camp too, but you still have Aaron Childs, Miles Graham, and certainly Jaden Robinson from Lake City there, along with Ty Jackson, the freshman, who looked really good in the spring game as well.
And they say Carmani McLean looks like another freak with the body mass he's put on there and the way he's performed. They talk about him like he looks like he's a defensive tackle, for crying out loud.
Well, he's up to 189.
Compared to where he was, but it's all muscle.
He's up 25 pounds. I mean, I think that's going to help him in bump and run, right? But you also have Dijon Johnson back in terms. But Cormani was one of my, I did kind of like a 5 players to watch, kind of stock risers. And Cormani and LJ McCray were on there, along with obviously Miles Graham, who really has an opportunity to take a step forward and be the leader of that defense, and Bryce Lovett and Aiden Mazzell on the offensive side. But, Cormani is a guy that, Billy did caution, though. He mentioned, he still has to get the playbook a little bit. And Dijon Johnson, obviously, his situation is resolved now, and I think he's back in good stead with the team. So that'll be an interesting position battle between, Dijon and Cormani, who gets that second quarterback spot. But, you could always play in dime packages, nickel packages too, multiple corners there, and get them all on the field at the same time. Along with Devin Moore, another guy who we're going to talk to tomorrow, who has to prove that he can stay healthy. I think that's another big, because he's been out as much as he's been in the lineup the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, before we go to break, I wanted to take a look at the offensive line for a second. The wide receivers room is really going to be. They're really excited about that. Certainly the tight end. They were all balling out about the tight ends yesterday too. Talk about what the coaches said about them.
But they like the tight ends, and I like Hayden Hansen a lot. And Livingston kind of came on late last season. I still think that in some ways, Boardingham was a pretty good receiver too, and losing him to the transfer portal was a bit of a blow. But I do like Hansen's size, obviously, and his ability in the run game, and Livingston too. I mean, those are 2 big tight ends, big bodies that you can use kind of in that 12 personnel just to help the running game as well, along with what they can do in the pass catching department. Now, I mean, are they Gazelle 10 5 to 10 touchdown guys at the tight end position? I don't know, but they can be effective in the red zone and give you a few scores here and there. And I think they'll be a pretty solid group.
Yeah. I want to tell folks about our sponsor. I talked to Jeffrey Melton. He was in Portugal, I believe. And he's on his way home next week. What a time, he said. I just had to go away on a 7-week vacation all across Europe to the edge of Asia and just and take in the sights and sounds of Spain and the Netherlands and what have you. I've traveled a little bit, but not like that. Have you?
I will tell you what, and you watch on local TV, it's good to be a personal injury lawyer, isn't it, nowadays in the state of Florida? It seems like everybody's got a racket in a commercial or something.
Well, don't say racket, because it's not a racket. He is our sponsor, and he is one of the best.
I know.
He wanted the best.
I kid because I love it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you just canceled because you called it a racket, but that's all right. I'll do the commercials. Anyway, so Jeffrey's been a friend of mine and a sponsor for a long time. He, of course, is the only official law firm from the University of Florida. He is the absolute orange and blue freak. He loves the Gators. He puts his money where his mouth is, and he's put money up for things like the bands, transportation, etc., constantly doing good things for the Florida Gators, a team that he loves. He'll be on his way home soon. If you need an attorney, you should call Meldon Law. They have 4 offices to serve you: Ocala, Gainesville, Lake City, and Williston. Meldon Law, they won't back down, and they're not a racket, just so you know. All right, so we're going to be joined by Allie here in a minute. I want to get this across. Today, one of the truly great, I don't ever use this word when I talk about writers. One of the great sports writers left her paper. Sally Jenkins has left the Washington Post. Why is this significant? Well, a lot of reasons. We know the state of journalism, and you know it. You're still in it. And Sally is one of the very best. And I've known her for a long time. Her father was a good friend of mine, and we spent many hours together, Dan and I did. And he was so proud of her when she graduated from Stanford. And she sent her resume out to 3 or 4 papers, and one of them was mine. She sent her resume to the Denver Post out of Stanford. I didn't have a spot for her at that time, but she was green as she could be. But she went to this little paper called the Washington Post, and became a superstar. Her daddy was probably as good a sports writer. My all-time favorite writer was her dad, Dan Jenkins, and my good friend, may you rest in peace. And I know he is proud of Sally. Today, she said, that's it. Give me the buyout. I'm moving on. And she's going to the Atlantic, where it seems like the great writers are going. So your thoughts about that? I know that it's grueling to watch what's happening in the newspapers because it's a different time we're in. But I hope we never lose sight of the greatness of the great journalists.
Yeah, and the great storytellers too. And she was that. And if you read her goodbye message, talking about that story about covering Katrina and Gulfport and the camaraderie that you had, and I think that's the other sad thing about the profession I've noticed in the last 10 or 20 years. Buddy, I can tell you that I've probably been in the Gainesville Sun office a handful of times since I've come back, just because of the state of things. And I do know they hold weekly meetings on Wednesday, and maybe I should go in a little more often. But it's more of news meetings and sports meetings. But we do everything over the computer basically, and we have but it's just not the same as the hustle and the bustle and the camaraderie that you get when you're working with your colleagues. I had it in Naples. Will Graves, the AP reporter who covers gymnastics for the Olympics and the Steelers. I was a groomsman in his wedding, 25 years ago. You don't have that with your colleagues anymore, not the same way. And I think that's a sad part of the profession. And I think for Sally Jenkins to just kind of point out some of those stories about staying in Gulfport, Mississippi, and I think what was it, it's staying in an SUV trunk because there were no hotels and stuff. It was just really, it brought back memories of a time that's probably gone by where we're all just doing everything over a computer screen, and that's how we're staying in touch. It's just not the same, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's and look, it's changed. You can't hold it forever. I've seen it change dramatically. As I said on Saturday night when I was at Spurrier's for the Tony Barnhart party, that I started on a typewriter.
Yeah.
What's that, you say? Well, I've still got mine, one of mine I use, and that typewriter is going to go to Spurrier's and will be there, and Steve will pick his own personal favorite, his Florida Hall of Fame of sports writers, going back to the 60s. And that was a large part of his career. I dare say, Joe Durso, who was a writer for the Times, covers college New York Times, came to his game when he kicked the field goal. Probably had a big part in him playing and winning the Heisman Trophy because he was there for it. Kevin, we didn't have writers from New York coming to the Florida games those days. And nothing was on TV, almost nothing. So if you didn't get a writer from a bigger city coming there, who's going to know about it? Well, I knew about Steve, and of course, he's got that beautiful restaurant down. Have you been through there very much?
Of course, yeah. And I've been through, and I know Freddie very well. And, you talk about getting the writer down there. Who probably got the writer down there? Another RIP, Norm Carlson, one of the great sports information, gurus of this time, who I got to know in his later years. When I first came down, he was retired, but he was in the press box in the early 2000s, or was always very gracious with his time and helping me. We lost, from my time in Indiana, we lost another great writer, right? Bob Hamill. I'm sure you saw, who was very close with Bob Knight, who was very nice to me during my time in Indiana. So you see these legends, and it's very sad to see that era of sports writing, going by the wayside a little bit. I still think there's room for great storytelling. I do know, in a lot of my meetings and Gannett, they want quick, fast pace, under 500 words. They claim that, readers don't have the attention span they used to. But to craft a really well-written story, I still think there's value in that. I still think that readers, particularly maybe in a state like this in Florida where you have a lot of retirees, I still think they enjoy that. They enjoy stories with perspective. And at least I try to approach the beat in giving a mix of that. I know the quick hitters are important, but it's good to be able to, tell a good story as well and spin a good yard. And that's what a lot of the old timers did.
Well, thank you for carrying that flame. And, you're one of the few that you've done it very well and continue to do it well. and you're a storyteller. You get the storylines across, but you can also turn a phrase, and you still value that. The announcement from the Atlantic said, Jeffrey Goldberg says, Sally Jenkins is possibly America's greatest living sports writer, or maybe, and more generally, one of the best feature writers working today. Sally is joining us in the Washington Post. This is the guy the Atlantic said, where she's published years of history-making stories. The Jenkins completist among us. I know there are many here at Atlantic. Remember her fantastic work for Sports Illustrated in its heyday. Anyone who takes a trip through 3 decades of writing will receive a master class in the lead of writing, deep reading, reporting, and narrative. I don't think he's right about that. I think he's mixing up Dan, her father. Recently, but I tell you, the Atlantic is really getting some good writers.
Unbelievable, yeah.
They got, I don't know all these people, but they've got Tom Bartlett, Idris Calhoun, Tyler Austin Harper, Quinta Jurisic, Jake Ledberg, Toulouse, I won't even try it, Alexander Perry, Vivian Salama, anyway, several people. And you see every now and then you'll see Jamal Hill or whoever who writes for it. So they're getting into some of the really good writing. Back in the day, Kevin, it was New York Magazine.
Yeah.
Great ones. And the guy was a friend of mine I worked with. There was the editor there. Anyway, so that came up today. And then Brent Musburger, remember him?
Yes, Brent.
Did you hear the news?
What, did he get inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
No, he's going to go back and call a half a game. He's going to say, Best Brush would join NBC broadcast booth on the second half of Thursday's Pro Football Hall of Fame game. Musburger named the winner of the 2025 Pete Rozelle Radio TV Award. I didn't know that was even a thing. Will join his former ESPN ABC colleagues Mike Tirico and Melissa Stark and analyst Chris Cosworth for the Chargers Lions contest. That's one I won't be watching. Musburger, who hosted the NFL Today CBS 15 years for his shot, 1990 firing, and spent the final 3 years of his career broadcasting Gators football on the radio. Now, by the way, just so you know, I spent 3 years at CBS on the NFL Today show, working expressly with Terry Bradshaw. You know how I got the job?
Because of Brett?
He got fired.
How about that?
It was fired, and Teddy Shaker, who was later my boss, hired Greg Gumbel, may God rest his soul, Terry Bradshaw, which is, really a wild card, Pat O'Brien, and Leslie Visser. And they were the four, and I was the guy who was the editorial consultant there. And I worked with guys like Chris Mortensen and stuff. So that was, that's right. That's the only way I was there trying with
I met Brent. Brent came to the Ale House a few times in Gainesville. He would come by there, and I met him at a flight on the way to Florida. Was playing Oklahoma in an SEC Big 12 game, and then he called the game, and he was very gracious with his time, and really enjoyed our interactions. And then later, when he had he had a gambling show on in Vegas from the South Point Casino, and I think he had me on later that year to talk about Florida in the NCAA tournament when they're playing Virginia. So. Really appreciated meeting him, and I'm glad to see that he's still going strong in his 80s. And I know that I remember Dan Patrick had mentioned that they were making a push to get him inducted into the Hall of Fame, the Pete Rozelle Award, because Brent, if you grew up, because I grew up in the 70s and the 80s when you were working for CBS and the Daily News, doing all the big time stuff, buddy, and Brent Musburger, NFL Today, that was appointment viewing. So
he was bigger than me. He covered everything. He was on everything. Yeah. He did the Final Four. He did the best. I mean, he did it all.
And you are looking live. I mean, that's great stuff.
Great. Yeah. That's his signature line.
Yep.
Yeah. And he was
in The Waterboy too.
Yeah,
one of the great lines, Dan Fouts. Shut up, Brent.
Yeah. And by the way, did you know he was a Chicago sports writer for the American when he started out?
Yeah. I mean, he's a Northwestern guy, right? He went to Northwestern.
Yes, that's true. Yes. So good for him. Got to see the old guys. I have not seen Happy Gilmore and probably won't. I'm not a huge Happy Gilmore fan. I think some of his fan okay, but it's a little corny to me. And I understand that Vern Lundquist makes it. My friend Woody
Vern is Vern is in there.
Texted me today and said, "Hey, I went to see Vern as a washed-up sportscaster in Happy Gilmore." So have you seen
it? He wears some interesting attire. It's kind of like tongue-in-cheek, makes fun of the Live Tour, and the's a lot of cameos in it from golfers. They did a pretty good job. Scotty Scheffler and Jack is in it, Nicholas, and John Daly, and amazing how many people. I finally finished it up yesterday. It's a lot of fun. It was a fun, breezy watch.
Yeah. Tell me about your life at the Sun. Allie's running a little bit behind.
Okay.
Tell me about what's going on.
Buddy, I was going to ask you this because we were talking about literary. Because we talk about Sports Illustrated. Who's your favorite all-time Sports Illustrated writer?
Dan Jenkins by a mile.
Dan was by a mile, yeah. Great golf writer too, right?
The best. He was the best.
Yeah.
I have many times. I was given the gift of being able to be his friend. I told my wife today I moved to Ponte Vedra when he was still living there. And we became good friends. And he owned a restaurant. I'd occasionally go down there and eat. And I traveled with him some. And one day I couldn't believe this. I'm at my little rental house over there on Ponte Vedra on the golf course where I lived. And Dan said, "You home?" I said, "Yes, I'll be right over." He comes to my house with a box. In that box are like 10 of his greatest books. Can you believe that? I was so overwhelmed I forgot to ask him to sign a single one. I know all his books, and I would like to have them all signed down my library, but he was just my favorite line. I would ask him, like, "All right, Dan, of all the years that you've covered the Masters, there are a few folks who don't like golf, I apologize. I said, what's the line that you wrote the most?" Because what happened was Dan would come, and he would go over to the clubhouse, and he would sit there and over in the club there over the rail under the big tree, and he covered the whole event from there. And he would talk to people wherever he needed to. And then he would come to the press facility and at deadline at 6:00 on Sunday, and you'd sit down and he'd hammer out a typewriter like he was playing a concert, a piano. And out of that would come this beautiful prose. He'd written half of his story already. And this was the second half after the winter. So I said to Dan, "Gosh, Dan, of all the 65, how many have you covered? What's the line you think you've used the most?" And he said, "Earlier in the week, comma." And you totally get that if you're a writer. When you get
exactly.
Stuff. So you've been up there, right?
Yeah, and I think that, as far as I'm concerned, Gary Smith, to me, buddy, was of my generation, was probably the guy that, his profile on Jim Valvano when he was dying, I thought was as good as it gets, in terms of, that was in Best American Sports Writing. And I would read Best American Sports Writing every year, which is a shame because I think it, fell by the wayside a few years ago. And I mean, his stories were routinely in it. And he was my guy. He was the guy that, I looked up to and, you try to emulate, you try to pick up different styles from different writers, but he was just, amazing, profile writer. And I read where his interviews too, he talked about how exhausting he was as an interviewer in terms of, his persistence in asking questions and getting detail, which is, the best way to paint a story is, it all starts in the reporting.
He's the only guy I've ever hired who brought a book with him to read during the interview when he had downtime. I hired him in New York.
Yeah.
And he sat outside for an hour and he read a book the whole time. And we knew right away when we started getting stories of what we had. It was gifted, and he wrote some wonderful stories, and he was just on his way, just getting launched. And he's one of the terrific young. I've been so blessed to work with guys like that. I love it. Now, here's a question for you while we wait for Alan.
Okay.
Spurrier's going to pick his, 10, 11, I guess probably 11 writers that influenced him back in the day. And there's going to be a typewriter in Spurrier's Grand Grill, and there'll be some names on the scroll. And notes before your time, but what name should be on that? Now, you remember, he started in 1963.
Oh, okay. So he was pre-Grantland Rice, or no?
No. He wasn't pre-Grantland Rice, but Joe Halberstam was the sports editor of the Sun at that time. And, and there was guys around the country, the state, like, Tom McEwen was just getting into his own. And then Mizell, who I hired at the St. Pete Times.
Yes.
There's a group of people that influenced Steve. Now, I don't know who's going to pick. I could be totally wrong. And it's hard to get things in the right era. It's extremely hard to get things in the right era. So what would be
is he doing this as when he was a player or a coach too?
a player? I think it's just he told Tony Barnard he was the best sports writer he knew outside of Florida. That was how Tony and he had it was kind of Tony's party celebration, but Steve was invited to be a co-celebrant. And he got up and said something about Tony. He said, "You're the greatest sports writer I know outside the state of Florida." And then at that point, I was able to announce this thing Freddie Weaver and I have been working on, that he would pick his all Florida squad and he would put them on this typewriter. And it would be have a place in there with all those great things they got. My guys, the Heismans and the rings and the trophies. What a great way to commemorate those people, who otherwise would be forgotten. So just based on what you know, and again, it's a long time before you were around, what names would you put there? You obviously would put Dooley and Robbie, although they weren't there then. They later came along, but they were not part of the launching. McEwen would be one, because McEwen got him the job as the coach of the Bandits. He was the one who called up the owner and said, "You should hire, interview this guy." And he did, and they hired him. So there'll be a dozen or so, maybe 10, 11.
So these are sports writers, but you said not from the 60s, just these are sports writers.
Well, it could be 60s and 70s mostly when he came up at Florida. And
so Dooley wasn't really, and Robbie weren't really sports writers.
No, they weren't. But I mean, they would be, because their body of work includes so much Spurrier, you put them in there.
Yeah, and I mean Mike Bianchi, maybe, right?
Maybe Bianchi might be a very good one.
I would think Bianchi would be on there. Certainly not Larry Guest, right?
He will not make the cut. He will not make the cut, that's for sure.
And you're thinking Tom McEwen, maybe, or
Tom McEwen's a shoe-in.
And Hubert. I mean, Hubert was.
And Hubert was working for me, but prior to that time, before he worked for me, worked for the AP, and he knew Steve, and Steve was fond of it. My guess is he'd be on there. Yeah.
Because, my sports writing knowledge in the state only goes back to the, 80s and 90s. And,
well, I know.
And don't forget, I went to the school down south, so I knew Edward Pope, and I went to school.
That's okay. Ed Pope might be on there. Yeah. Ed Pope is the reason today I wear these black glasses.
Yeah.
He was my hero.
Okay.
And I thought I had actually won the Pulitzer Prize once when we were in Gainesville, and Edmund came out, and my wife was standing by the elevator, and I barely knew Edmund, and he had seen her with me, and he said, "Are you Mrs. Martin?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Okay." She said, he said this to her. He said, your husband is the hell of a sports writer." And she came back and told me, "Oh my gosh, Edward Pope called me a hell of a sports writer." That was like winning the Pulitzer, man.
I'll tell you who's a very underrated guy who I don't know if he would necessarily make the cut, but he was always very nice to me because as you know, I don't know if you know, but I got my start as a student, as a Coro at the Palm Beach Post, was Dave George was always very nice to me.
Yeah. I go back to Bob Balfe. That's how far back I go to Palm Beach Post.
The Palm Beach Post.
Yeah. Okay. He was a good guy. Well, you saw some good ones. What was the reputation of the press corps back then in Florida?
In the
well, in terms 60s? Of how when you were starting out at Palm Beach, what was your
no, I mean, like, I didn't really, buddy, like, it was so insular, but I would travel the state and I would meet them, and they were always very nice, in terms of like dealing with certain guys. I remember I came up to Lake City for the Old Florida Sports Writers Award in 1995, and Dooley made a quip because I was working at QS at the time and I had won some awards, and he said they should give you an award for just driving up here, But like I said, Robbie Andrew was someone I knew a little bit.
What did you like about Robbie? Tell me about Robbie.
Robbie was, Robbie was a very happy-go-lucky guy, and someone that, people knew his reputation in the 1990s as being close to Spurrier. Although Robbie told me a story once when Spurrier was really mad at him because he said that Terry Bowden was a better coach than he was, or something like that.
That's in his book. Yeah, that's been told a lot. I think I've heard this story many times. Don't mean to step on your show, but every Friday they'd have to pick the game.
Yeah.
And this was when Florida was playing Auburn. And they had to give edge here, and he gave Terry Bowden the edge. And that's what
in coaching, right?
In coaching. And that got him off. And Steve can, let me tell you what, Steve can get after you. I can only think about his quarterbacks, the hell they had to pay, for playing for him, which made him great. And by the way, if people didn't know this, he was death on any kind of things like procedures or techniques. You had to, if you were not on your landmark as a receiver, he'd run you out of town. I mean, you just didn't do that. And they would throw every single, talk about Lagway, they would throw every single day, the quarterbacks were. And yet Shane says, isn't it funny, none of us ever missed a game with injury. Do you realize that? His quarterbacks never missed a game with an injury? Are you kidding me? That's crazy.
And think, because I was talking with Judd Davis for another story about this, and he was talking about Danny too, and how tough a guy he was, and watching him with his shirt off and seeing all the bruises and stuff. But you think about Steve's offense too, and the number of 7-step drops, right? And you're just you had to have the good offensive line, otherwise you were getting hit. I think that was a big issue in the NFL with in Washington was that situation too, where people would blitz him all the time, and because it's really hard to do 7-step drops in the NFL.
Yeah, 7-step drop was a big deal, and you better be on your landmarks. And Spurrier was death on that stuff. And speaking of death, there she is.
There she is.
Hello.
All right, did she have Gilmore? What'd you see?
No, we saw Jurassic Park, which I probably should not have taken 5-year-olds to, but we were. They had already seen Lilo and Stitch earlier in the summer, and we were trying. There's only a couple nights left of summer, so we're trying to do all the things with all the kids and fit it in before school starts again. So they hid their face on me half the time. The bigger ones loved it.
I don't even want to go see it. I'm too scared of it. So, by the way, and Kevin, if you can hang. If you can't, I understand, but. We only got a few more minutes. I want to get this in. Sally Jenkins leaving the Washington Post and going to the Atlantic. Did you hear about that?
I did not. Interesting.
What do you think of Sally Jenkins?
I honestly, I don't even know who Sally Jenkins is.
You need to know that. All right, you need to know.
Now I'm gonna have to look her up.
Probably
as a columnist, right? I know I can gather that much.
Washington Post.
Yeah.
Probably as good as. I'll let Kevin tell you. Her daddy was Dan Jenkins, and she was right there. And then tell him, Kevin, because he was my good friend. Tell him who Sally was.
Did she used to write for Sports Illustrated?
Yeah, and
she's written, Washington Post, Sports Illustrated. Yeah. She's pretty, she's been on the Sports Reporter.
Okay, so I think I do know who she is.
Yeah. And Dan Jenkins, who Buddy knew, is one of the, if not probably the greatest golf writer that's ever lived.
Well, sports writer, never mind golf. Yeah. Sports writer, period.
Yeah, and a sports writer, period. Yeah, but golf was his wheelhouse. But as far as Sally Jenkins is concerned, I mean, she covered Olympics, she covered a multitude of women's sports in the DC area, along with men's sports. I mean, really everything. Columnist, wasn't afraid to hold a strong opinion, and just a tremendously talented writer. So,
so let her tell you what her night was like Saturday, cavorting with the likes of Danny Werfel, Shane Matthews, Chris Doring. Who am I leaving out?
Steve Spurrier, Jerry Spurrier, their kids, of course, Buddy and Pat, and
Robbie
and Franz. Honestly, like I said this on your show on Monday, I totally felt like somehow my phone number got on the wrong text message thread. And so like when the invites went out, they were like, oh, I was supposed to put it on that one. Dang. But it was really cool. It was an honor to be with such an intimate group. And I really, I feel like I soaked up some knowledge sitting in that room. It was cool to hear the stories. It was neat to see the relationship between Danny Werfel and Chris Doring and Shane with Jerry Spurrier. I feel like that's something that you don't, necessarily get an insight to as much. I could have guessed that they have a close relationship with Coach Spurrier because, that was their coach, but it's cool to see, kind of the first lady of Florida football and how after all these years, they still look at her, like a mother figure. And I think that that's when you've done something right, is when your former players, years and years and years later want to come back and spend time with you.
I can't say this without sound like I'm just absolutely just, just letting orange and blue blood cover me head to toe. But there was such a great feeling in that room with all those guys, especially and women, and the whole Spurrier family. I don't know, maybe the second or third time I've ever been with them, they had the whole family. One time Steve came to Colorado and brought his family. We all went to eat, but that was 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, to see Lisa and to see Amy, whose idea it was to start the restaurant, and Bubba. Don't call him Bubba. He wants to be called Steve now. There as well. So it's special. And I know, Kevin, you would have been invited if it was my list, but it wasn't. It was Tony Barnhart's list, and he had about 35 people he wanted to keep it to. I've got questions from people like, how come I didn't get an invite? I don't know.
Buddy, I was out of town anyway, but I was invited to the James Bates unveiling of Todd Golden, which was very nice. Which is cool, well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I saw Jerry there, and I saw Lisa there was there as well, James Bates, and I saw how Jerry interacted with James, and it was kind of the same thing, like that whole mother, like how reverential they are to the Spurrier family. Allie, I definitely saw that last Thursday night as well.
Not to infer you're not invited to all the big events because you are. I didn't mean that. This is just a little different. Because it was. But no, I know.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I was, like I said, I was out of town for my family birthdays and stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Right before the start of camp, which is, as you know, is up and running.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, camp started today, and the remaining minutes we got, let's talk about it. Allie had a long column about, here we go. Can I just drop this guy in here? Let me just put this in here real fast. And I got to give this guy a name. I'm going to call him Buddy, okay?
There you go.
Looks like me, doesn't he?
Oh, my gosh, adorable.
I got it off there. I had to get that. But nonetheless, it was today was the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was yesterday with Kevin sitting next to him in the Sistine Chapel where you go to cover things. And we heard coaches, and we heard Billy, and I played something earlier about the comment. It was kind of the converse of what you wrote, not juxtaposed, but you wrote today, how critical it was for Lagway to be in the lineup, and Kevin's written that way, and I agree. But this was a little bit different about, what about if they didn't have him? How good could they be? How good are they? And we went through the list, and I'm telling you, this is a really good football team. And Allie, we've done this a lot, and Kevin, we've done it a few times, where you go through there, and there are not many flies on anybody there. I think they could be a really good football team without Lagway there. They can never probably make the championship. But what about that, Allie?
I mean, I think, and this is going to come out of my mouth, and I'm not comparing us to the mid-2000s Alabama team. I'm not predicting that kind of success or anything like that. But, those teams, those first Saban teams, 2009 and 10 and 11, they had game managers as their quarterbacks. And that's because the talent around them was so good that they didn't need a DJ Lagway, right? They just needed somebody who wasn't going to make mistakes. And while I'm not saying we have the same level of talent as 2009 Alabama, I do think Florida's offensive line, wide receivers, and running backs are so strong that if you have someone who's just going to play mistake-free football, they could still score a lot of points. I think you rely on your running game. You trust your line, and you can kind of ride that momentum if you were to have to go with like a Harrison Bailey or something like that, who, by the way, looked like he could sling it in the clips I saw coming out of practice today. So definitely not a slight to him. I nobody compares to DJ Lagway right now on our roster, and that's just the reality. Nobody compares to him on most rosters in college football. But I do think Florida still would have the potential to win a good amount of football games. Now,
what's a good amount? What's a good amount?
7 without him.
Okay. I mean, I agree with that.
I don't think they're beating down the door for the playoffs without him, but I think that they could still have a respectable season without him because of how good some of those other rooms are.
Coming out of that press conference yesterday, Kevin, the unbelievable comments made about Tyreek Sapp and Jaden Ball. Jaden Ball is the strongest man on that football team. All right. Now,
pound for pound, that's what they
said. Don't have to preach to the choir on that deal. But boy, how good is this big guy, and how good can he be, and how much of a factor, Kevin? I mean, could he carry this team?
Well, I mean, I think you got Jacoby Jackson too. Let's not forget, and we alluded to that too. And
Webb, and
Well, yeah, and Webb's going to be a little limited to start camp. They mentioned, and I know he's been pretty banged up, and he is a guy that if he gets healthy too, and KD Daniels, and I think you've got some other options. But I think Ball and Jackson will be the two bell cows in that regard. And as Ali mentioned before, you do have the line too. You've got some pretty good. I look back to that Tennessee game and how Jake Slaughter was run blocking. I mean, he was opening Chris Lowe's eyes. He was like, who is this guy? In terms of Chris Lowe being an ESPN writer, in terms of that was one of those games where Jake really got on the radar, where he was just manhandling, some pretty good Tennessee defensive front guys as well. So I think that, again, and I alluded to this early in the show, I think they finally have an SEC level line of scrimmage. They've got the depth there. So that's a good foundation. That's a good building block. And then from there, the skill position guys, do they continue to emerge? Do they continue to take steps forward and play with that level of urgency that you need to play in the SEC? And we'll see about Harrison Bailey. It's amazing. I talk to people that are still really high on Aiden Warner over Harrison Bailey for some reason. But I think Bailey's probably got a better arm, right? But Warner seems to be a pretty good leader in that regard too, and is a little mobile. So that's going to be an interesting battle. Who's going to be the backup quarterback for DJ if DJ is healthy going into the season, or how that's going to be divvied out the first couple of games with Long Island and USF. And again, you have that cushion at least a little bit where you're not facing a Power 4 conference team off the bat, where you're going to have time to get DJ a little bit healthier and work him in, and B, try out some other guys and see what they can do.
Just so you know, the Rays lead the Yankees 3-2. I think give them a home run. Now it's 3-3 at the bottom of the ninth. They're at the bottom of the ninth, and the Yankees are just got a base hit. All right, so look, I mean, I get all the stuff about who they got to. I'm talking about Jaden Ball, the incredible player he is, to be what he is, to be as fast as he is. He dominated last year. He's even stronger, smarter, to be as big as he is, 240-something pounds, and be able to run the football like he can. And remember when we lost ETN, everybody said, oh, my God, running game. No, remember, he couldn't block the blitz. That was his problem. You don't have to have that problem with Jaden Ball.
Yeah, I mean, I have liked him since his first spring game. I watched him play. I thought he was incredibly talented. The interesting thing for me will be Napier loves a running back by committee, no matter how talented.
Well, Jalou does. That's his thing.
Yeah, any specific guy is. But that, I mean, yes, Jalou does, but that's, I mean, it's Napier's program, right? It's Napier's offense, and they have the entire time he's been here, it's been running back by committee. So I'll be interested to see, do they like Ball enough that the numbers on that are a little bit more skewed in his favor, or is it really going to be this by committee regardless? I mean, they're all talented, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I do think, taking a little bit less beatings probably benefits you long-term for your potential future NFL career. But will he ride the hot hand? Will the rotation be set regardless of how they're doing? I'm interested to watch some of those things as the season starts.
Buddy, one more point on Ball too, buddy. He's actually at 231. Last year he was at 237, so he's down a bit, but I think that's by design. Jalou wanted him a little lighter, maybe to be a little bit more elusive, and but he still has that strength. So we'll see how that plays out during a sophomore season.
Yeah, they talk about losing fat, losing and getting strength, et cetera, et cetera. Let me just put this guy up as we go out, and I'll let you guys tell me beside him who are the 2 or 3 players on defense that have got to perform for the defense to be any good. Let's start by getting this guy, if I can get him over here. Hang on a second. This is remarkable pictures from a day's practice. And I have not seen those videos, Al, you talked about. I want to see him. This guy is just a physical freak. You're talking about a guy who's 275 pounds and runs like a deer, edge rushing. I'm going to say I think that this guy is going to be a huge difference. Allie, give me 1 or 2 players on defense, and you, Kevin, quickly, that have got to perform for the defense to be any good to make the stops.
I mean, obviously we need Sapp to step up. I don't know that we necessarily need him to perform well for the defense to be successful, but I'm super interested to see what happens with Cormani McLean. I think it's a really cool story. Everything we've been told is that he's coming along. And then I'm interested to see LJ McCray. He's somebody that came in with a ton of, kind of fanfare. And I want to see, has he taken the next step? What are we going to get out of him? I think he's incredibly talented.
Kevin, according to what they said yesterday, you say LJ McCray is taking quite a step, right?
Yeah, no, certainly the strength there. Buddy, I'm going to say, Caleb Banks, and I'm going to say Miles Graham to up the gut, middle linebacker, defensive tackle, because I think they've got a lot of options on the edge, as we mentioned, LJ being one of them, George Gums, Kofi Asari, the transfer. You're hearing good things about him in the spring. Woods and Wiggins, the 2 incoming freshmen. But, what are they going to be like up the gut? And can Caleb Banks, first-round projected talent, provide that pressure up the gut that he provided last year at the end of last year and really came on with that wingspan too, disrupting passes. And Miles, I think he's a guy that's really poised to, former Under Armour All-American, came on late in his freshman season, really poised to kind of be that leader and that really short tackler. And will replace Shamar James in that regard.
Agree on Miles Graham. All right, Allie, what's your show tomorrow? Or you got one up now?
I have one. Yeah, I have one out about DJ, and then I've got one coming out about some of the freshmen that I'm interested to see that I think will have some playing time relatively early. Talk a little bit about VB3, Dallas Wilson. I think there's some freshmen that could get some playing time. So got a video coming out about that.
Saw a great video of Wilson by catching the ball today. Kevin, what about you? What are you writing about? I know the next couple of days. And we got the big, not scrimmage, but practice day on Saturday.
Yeah, and I've got something, obviously, buddy, I think we talked about earlier on, supporting cast and, can this team survive with Lagway limited, possibly going into the season. And also a little something on Trey Smack, too. I talked to Judd Davis today about why Trey Smack might have some incentive to win the Groves Award this year. This will surprise you, a little friendly wager he has with Judd Davis. So.
Yeah, good one on Trey Smack. Guys, thank you. Allie, thanks for hustling back from Jurassic Park. Kevin, thank you for staying the whole day, whole hours. Great stuff. Appreciate it.
Good stuff.
All right, thanks a lot.
Bye,
Kevin
guys.
Brockway and Allie Peek Wilbur, and we thank them for joining the program tonight. Well, I tell you about our sponsors. We like to be able to tell you about them because they make it possible for us to do this. And one of them is Titan MRI and Imaging. They are really becoming quite a player in the field of MRIs. And they have 3 locations to serve you. 2 in Gainesville with Park Avenue location, and now Millennium Center, and 1 in Lake City, serving all of Columbia County and Valdosta, Georgia. Titan MRI and Imaging has the same great customer service. They can do things like give you a night appointment. Can you imagine that? To get an MRI if you need it, if you can't be there during the day. They accept insurance, or you can go through their convenient self-pay options. They offer MRIs, CAT scans, x-rays, ultrasound. Easy scheduling for you, as I said. If you have a conflict, they will help you get the time where you can be there and come and see what they've got to offer, including those big cages that you can get and won't get claustrophobic. And they have several locations to serve you, and they're going to get one soon in Ocala. No ERs, no hospitals, and they will be in Marion County soon. Titan MRI and Imaging, it's your choice. Thank you for Allie, especially for Kevin staying with us the whole duration. And for all 6,000 and 7,000 of you tonight for watching the show, don't forget, check out Gator Bait. You'll see Fran's beard, and you'll see some of the stuff I've written. I hope you enjoy it and appreciate your supporting us on this program and on Gator Bait. And by the way, check us out, GatorBaitMedia.com, and if you want to join and find out what we have to say. Have a great night.